Hey guys, how's everybody? We have a couple others here. This is Vile and myself, June, and John Chamberlain was going to be here, and Thomas Cox as well, but he has a meeting. So anyway, uh, if if you guys can say something in the chat, if you can hear and see us, Yves, we'll invite you. So we got about four or five people here. Thanks, Elam. How's it going, Jason? So I will invite Yves since he's ready. So Vile and I were just talking in the green room for just about a minute, and we were, hey, how's it going, Yves?
Yourselves?
Good.
Hey, Vile.
So we were just trying to figure out the agenda for today. We could keep it somewhat flexible, but I think before the idea was just to cover the current constitution. EOS Alliance has a series that you guys, if you're interested, should attend weekly, where people get together and discuss certain articles of the Constitution. And I think collectively we're like halfway through, right? But anyways, I thought it'd be a good idea for us to maybe take kind of a high level approach and just go over individually these articles as well. Because usually when we break out into groups with the EOS Alliance, we probably are only seeing one or two of these articles. So I thought it'd be a good idea to just dig into it. The last session we had was really just discussion on a really good discussion though on some of the key issues going on in governance. But again, I think getting straight to the Constitution is somewhat more efficient sometimes because conversations could go in many directions when it's free form. So, but just maybe I should ask the audience as well what you guys are interested in. I mean, the plan, it wasn't a firm plan, but it was to go over the current Constitution. Hey, how's it going, Scotty? So Jason, Elam, Scotty, I don't know who else is out there, but I'm just kind of curious what you guys are interested in, just to get some feedback. And then if you guys are okay with just going over the current Constitution, is there any pressing issues we can also discuss that? I don't know, maybe in the beginning or before we start.
It'd be interesting to talk about kind of what the intent was with the Constitution. So I participated in those alliance calls. Mm-hmm. The call that I participated in this week was week 3, and we went over Articles 7, 8, and 9. I was on the team that the breakout room that did number 9. But I think it's interesting to maybe go back to high level. What's the point of a constitution? I think that's what they did on call 1. So what's the whole point of this?
Okay. Yeah, and here I think quite integral question is the hierarchy of norms that we discussed in our last meeting here last week, because, well, I'm not sure which way it should be. Thomas said last week that by default, whatever Constitution says can be overridden by the Ricardian contract of your account, and that makes sense. But then we have clauses like the confiscation of tokens, the stealing article, and can you override that in your own Ricardian contract? And
so, Vile, I think just to clarify, I don't think Thomas said that you yourself can override the Constitution in your own Ricardian contract. I think the idea was if you and I get into and I think it was a very specific question, if you and I get into a business contract and we decide to, in our world that we're creating, which is a subworld of EOS, change the rules within our playing field, our rules can apply. We still belong in the other world, So as long as we don't get out of our little theme park, then yeah, those rules can be, modified. But we can't, for example, I could not, in my world, I can say in my world, it's okay to lie. And as long as you and I are playing in this world, then we're okay to lie. But as soon as we step out of this world, we start interacting with people that are in, let's say, the main net, then it's not okay to lie because in my world, I said it was. I think that was the exact example that was used, right?
Oh yeah, that's correct. But still, if we think our Ricardian contract between us and the persons who interact with my account, then the stealing example here. I'm jumping.
Sorry,
here and
just cut off.
So basically, I could still say, like, if you interact with my account, you will be party of this contract, and you shall not take my tokens away. And general consensus is that this is not possible. It seems so that people have this consensus that I can't have an account with Ricardian contract saying you shall not steal my tokens. But then that would disrupt the hierarchy if Constitution doesn't triumph.
No, because I think it would depend in that circumstance. You'd be entering into an agreement with somebody else. So it'd be you and I doing business. I don't know, I'm selling you a bicycle, you're buying my bicycle. And then we would, for example, but then you and I would come into a contract together. In that contract, what we would add, I'm not allowed to steal your accounts within that, your tokens within that transaction. I'm not sure I follow how you would create a contract just for yourself that isn't applicable to everybody else. So it would be a self-contract to say, nobody can steal my own tokens? I'm not sure I'm following you on that one.
Oh, well, I kind of presume that there is always another actor who is interacting with the account that I have the Ricardian contract for. So there will be a relationship between that person and my account. Whoever that is who is going to interact. And
so you would add something that's not currently in the Constitution within that contract between you two? Or you would or are you asking if we modify one of the articles in the Constitution?
Oh, no, I mean that if I would have a Ricardian contract in my account saying that the persons who interact with my account shall not steal the tokens. That would be any actor, basically.
I'm not sure I follow you. How would you have a Ricardian contract in your account?
And Ville, we're talking about contracts, so someone would have to also agree to be a counterparty to that contract. So this is an interesting point, because going back to what Yves wanted to do was maybe step back and think about what the Constitution is and how it seems to be, at least from a brief scanning of the Constitution, that it's a multi-party contract, just a general purpose, and so it's a different from a specific recording contract that has two specific parties, right? So this is like if you create a multi-party contract, somehow maybe there could be some conflict. But in this case that I think you're describing, there's a distinction there. The Constitution is supposed to be a multi-party contract that includes everybody using the system, and the recording would have to have everybody sign your particular contract to be somehow conflict
valid, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's correct. But here, quick technical overview here. Like every account with the ABI, every account can have their own Ricardian contract. That's meant for basically for smart contracts, but anyway, Ricardian contract can be attached to an account, and then of course this is not tested in court yet in any way. But we could presume that by interacting with the account, you agree on the Ricardian contract of the account.
That distinction that you make right there, why would we assume that if I interact with your account, and I guess what does interacting with your account mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's not specified, like how we come how we become a party of the Ricardian contract. At the moment, the clearest example is that you use a function call or action.
Yeah, and right now it's any type of use of the blockchain has that Ricardian associated to it, and so therefore you're signing or you're agreeing to that by just having it by using the blockchain, right?
Oh yeah, that's the constitution part. Ricardian contracts.
So how would that work though with your particular account if you were to change the Ricardian?
Oh well, that's already there. This mechanism is already there, and you can see this, for example, when you use Scatter. You can see the Ricardian contract of the smart contract that you are interacting with. So Ricardian contract here can be a general Ricardian contract. Then we have the constitution, which is a Ricardian contract, which we all agree to.
Yeah, which is
And then there is this account-specific Ricardian contract, which we don't know much about yet because it haven't been tested in court. But in general, when you interact or when you send an action to the account, then you agree on the constitution of the account. That's why you can see the Ricardian contract when you make some interaction with Scatter, for example.
But when you make the interaction with Scatter, you are implicitly and explicitly opening Scatter and interacting with Scatter.
Oh yeah, and you then interact with the smart contract that you want to interact with. For example, let's say that you want to send decentralized tweet. You send an action to the decent tweet account or decent Twitter account, and then the account could have a Ricardian contract associated with the account and the action that you are taking. So that makes you a party. But where is the line? For example, in the stealing situation where EOS as a community decides to confiscate your tokens, in this case there must be some interaction where the funds leave. Technically, of course, with normal tokens, that's the token account. Yeah, that's of course there. But what is the interaction? What is the limit of interaction of the Ricardian contract?
Yeah, I'm not understanding fully the details maybe of the question. At a high level, I do understand just the norm hierarchy concept that we discussed last week, where which one takes precedence, the Constitution or Ricardian contract, and Thomas's answer was within the DApp environment that would supersede the Constitution, just in that environment.
One would always precede the other, right? And so you could have multiple levels of. So similarly, you could always engage in a deeper and deeper level of Ricardian contracts if you so wished. But I'm sorry, Vila, I'm not sure I understand your question in terms of kind of what you're looking for as an answer.
This is more like general for kind of general discussion on what where should be the line between the constitution and the account Ricardian contract. What is the jurisdiction of accounts Ricardian contract, and what is the jurisdiction of the constitution?
So where one begins and one ends, if there's such a thing. I think right now it's untested.
Yeah, indeed. But that was my
idea. And I'm not a legal specialist. I don't know. I guess we would need. I think it would help if we had a concrete example of where one would perhaps overlap with the other, and where that zone might create conflict. If we had maybe an example, and then we could, as non-legal experts, maybe try to run it through to see what would be the thought process behind determining which one perhaps might have precedent over the other. But without a concrete example, for me right now, I find it very difficult to see how that would apply, or where perhaps that line would be. Yeah, but I think, like June was saying, maybe one of the ways that we could do this is maybe, I don't know, June, what your intent was for tonight, but maybe taking an article or taking a couple of articles and just talking them through. I don't know what was your plan tonight?
Yeah, that was originally the plan, but I just wanted to get some feedback about maybe other ideas about what people were interested in. Jason did write something in the chat, which will. But before I lose my thought, I wanted to follow up with that legal question. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but for contract law, I think it was important distinction that was made last week about the Constitution really being a multi-party contract, or a contract. Mm-hmm. Almost, and this is what I mentioned last week, that it's kind of like an equal footing to the Ricardian contract. It doesn't supersede it. Typically, you would have constitutions be the at the top of the hierarchy, but we're actually just we have a multi-party contract that could be, as Thomas mentioned, could be named an association agreement rather than a constitution, and you have a Ricardian contract. So if you really just have two contracts, I think it would be good to dive into what takes precedence in contract law. I think what would is, if you have a contract that says this is the kind of the ultimate authority, and anything else is not. You could put clauses in that contract. The other thing that they'll look at is probably the date. The more recent contract will have precedent over the older contract. So those are the couple from the various things that I've read in the past. Those are the couple of points that people will consider in determining which takes precedent. But the big point,
I think, as well, June, I think as well, like you were talking about, which one is earlier in time or later in time. So which one is the most recent one? Yeah. If ever you interacted with the chain, whatever you did prior to this new version, if let's say there was a yes before it was okay and now it's no longer okay, if you interacted with the chain while it was okay, and now it's no longer okay, you still can't, that's very clear, you still can't go back and prosecute somebody because they did something that's no longer okay in the time that it was okay, right? So yes, you would go by what's the most recent one, but you wouldn't be able to go back in time with this new now version of whatever it may be.
And I agree with that, but it's usually, again, it's specific to the contract. So usually it's updating specific conflicts within that, and rather than one not being valid or valid. So, and I do agree. I mean, it doesn't mean you could neglect your past contracts unless you both agree, and that whatever happened.
Whenever you both agree, then there's no problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that I got myself communicated, because both of you, I think both of you now got my question, or well, it's kind of an open question, and like I said in the beginning of this, that it's not tested in court, so we don't really know, but it would be this order of or precedent would be good to keep in mind when we think what is the intention of this constitution, because I think that the norm hierarchy here is quite critical to the intention, because it wouldn't do more than contract law would permit it to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree that it is important. And I think that means that's why the language, I think, is also important, just because maybe we should just avoid using, I think for marketing purposes, constitution is nice, but I think to minimize confusion, we should maybe switch the language to an agreement, either a user agreement or association agreement, something like that, because I think the hierarchy question, there's some confusion there, and if it is not, there is not this hierarchy, we should just change the language. I think just. Yeah,
I guess there are terms of agreement.
Yeah,
but I think the idea that with the Constitution, clearly I believe the intent when this was written, the idea was to reference it somewhere, something similar to the US Constitution. So it's a base layer document that determines kind of everything that goes forward, the rules of play. And then if we would have been located somewhere else, I'm not American, but I think that if the majority of the people that were working on this were located somewhere else, we probably would have used a different term. I think you're right that from a legal perspective, it's probably closer to a terms of agreement than it is a constitution. But I think part of it from the constitutional point of view was also creating, the vision of Dan was to create kind of another nation. And so the word nation came about quite a bit, and it was kind of a different government. You're setting up a different level of government. And so reusing words that are used in current governments was the original intent. And if this is laying the foundation for, then in a way it is a constitution. Yeah, but I'm not trying to excuse or justify the wording. And I think that perhaps if we want to be more specific, we always need to define our terms. I think I'm just trying to go back to why that particular word was chosen.
Yeah, and then I think if we dig into the Constitution, we'll see a lot of articles that probably are more consistent with the idea that, you know, we are building a kind of a new nation and a constitution for it. So I mean, that is,
well, even just calling them articles, right? We're calling them articles because we want to enumerate them, kind of deal, and we want to split that out and make it very clear. So even just calling them articles, I think, references the mindset that people are in when we're writing these or looking at these and creating this.
Sure. I think articles are probably a little bit more consistent. I think regular contracts are just clauses. I mean,
yeah,
articles,
it's just a clause, right?
Yeah, clauses. So yeah, so I do. So let's say, so Jason, just before we forget, he did mention that what he's interested in is interested in language that in the Constitution that might pertain to digital corporation registered to the global enterprise platform that EOS is, something that can facilitate legal aspects of STO security tokens across international legal frameworks. Yeah, the first part is I think Ville and myself we're interested in that kind of part of it, just to not have external intervention, or at least the least amount of external intervention. But then the legal aspects of security tokens might be a little bit more difficult than that, because now you're talking about, you know, interoperation between, you know, real traditional systems and EOS, which is, I think, a little bit more outside the scope of that. So, but there could be interoperability. But anyway, so that's what Jason was interested in. The Constitution makes clear the enforcement powers for the interpretation of all contracts and interaction. Okay, so he was making a comment about that. Constitution makes clear. Okay.
So I think what Jason is just reiterating what we were saying, where the Constitution lays the groundwork, the foundation, and everything stems from that in terms of should there be disputes. Those were the rules at play that were chosen from the very beginning that we both agree on. So it is, you're right, it's a multi-party contract. You and I both agree on at the base that these are the rules of the game that we're about to play.
Okay. So go ahead, Ville, and then maybe we could probably just dig into the Constitution just because. Anyways, go ahead, Ville. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But quickly to Jason's first part of Jason's first message here. So I have been doing some experiments with digital corporations and in Finland and US, and I'm very interested to experiment on EOS companies, but there is one major obstacle, which is that when there weren't really real companies with legal personality, like in Middle Ages, companies were made by contracting, and that would be possible today, but you wouldn't get legal personality. This is something that receives almost global consensus. There are a couple of scholars who believe that, or well, who takes, for example, trusts, and they ponder if trust can be a legal person because trust can own and things like that. But it's still global consensus that something which is purely a contract, like a trust, cannot be a legal person. And when you start to have a big company, you want it to have a distinct personality. You could, by contracting, you could do everything else than the legal personality, and that's difficult to do without any government, because basically government is giving the personality. So there is this fundamental problem.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And Ville, I'll have to kind of review kind of your earlier comments about how individuals were able to create companies, but that's a longer discussion. And the other thing I wanted to also add to that is corporate law and corporations are along the, is the area I think you're probably interested in, Ville. If you read William Blackstone's commentaries of the laws of England, and he wrote this in 1765, 1769. This is one of the main resources that people use to interpret English law. And English law is the most, I think, most advanced, debatably, but it's the most advanced that we have, and are one of the most advanced that we have. And so he wrote commentaries about why corporations exist. Doesn't go into the level of detail about how you said individuals could incorporate. Usually it was the king that at least had the final authority to in the formation and of these. But it's, in essence, it was probably following something more based on the common law and the ability for people to do it regardless of the king. And we don't have kings anymore, so we have states, right? So that, but you have individual states that are able to incorporate any entities right now. So anyway, so it's a little different, but the idea, go ahead.
Because you are right. In Middle Ages, kings gave charters for few companies, but normal kind of entrepreneur didn't have this kind of charter. Usually guilds and very big companies like the East India company got chartered, and by charter you could have legal personality because that comes from authority which decides personalities, like a state does nowadays. But chartering wasn't available for normal peasants, so to say. So if you wanted to have joint venture, you had to have a contract. So you would have a structure and even a governance if you would like, but not a legal personality. You would still be liable of your own actions, and you couldn't have the company to take the responsibility of contracting, for example, from you. But guilds were the first legal persons. For example, in ancient Rome, if I remember correctly, in ancient Rome, the first ones were guilds, and well, then it started from there. But normal person couldn't get another legal personality for their business. But maybe we are diverting here a bit from the.
Yeah. This is all good stuff, for sure. And we could probably save this discussion for another time, which I'm definitely interested in having. But for this, I think everyone's probably interested in some parts of the Constitution, and so maybe the idea is, and Thomas might actually drop by a little bit later too, so we can. Maybe it's just good to try to dig into the Constitution and see how far we get. So, what do you think? Okay.
I'm still here, by the way. I just don't want to eat in front of you guys. Okay. So I just turned off my camera because it was dinner time, but I'm still listening in.
Okay. And if anybody also wants to jump in the video chat, please, we can add probably one other person. Anybody else here? Just if you guys want, you guys can just let me know, raise your hand, I guess, in the chat window, and then we could bring you in if you have a webcam and good internet. So do you want to just dig into the Constitution, guys? Just go over it. Okay. So,
yep.
Ville has the link.
That's fine.
And I'm going to open it up. So.
All right, there you go. I'm done. It was just kind of improper and kind of not very nice to be eating in front of you guys, but I need in webcams all day.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. I don't think you have any food stuck on your teeth, so you're good.
Let me know if ever.
So, okay. So hey, so it's Marcin, right? I think I pronounced your name wrong before, and I was like, hey, am I pronouncing it right? I think is it Marcin or Marcin? I think it's Marcin, like it's with a CH kind of. Is that true? Marcin. See?
I've been saying it wrong this whole time, and he's never corrected.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, no, I was like, sorry, because I started to say Marcin.
Same here.
So it's okay. It's like me, and people call me Yves. I'm like, yeah, there's no S, but yeah, sure.
I might have done that too. Sorry if I did, but I've been saying Yves actually for the most part right now. So. Marcin. Okay, so, but yeah, whenever you're available, Marcin, just let us know. I know you're busy, but if you want to hop in, just let me know. And anybody else who wants to, we have room for 4 people on the video chat. So, all right, great. So we'll wait for you in a few minutes. So we can just go directly to the Constitution. The other thing I was thinking, if there's anybody who can take notes, that's always a good thing. For any organization, you usually have a president and a secretary, and secretaries are very important because they record everything and it's official. And
well, because if it wasn't recorded, it never really happened, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, and this is being recorded too. So, but for just a summary that we can post in writing, it's very effective. And again, yeah, for organizations, the secretary is incredibly important. So, if anybody wants to volunteer, that really appreciate that. I'm a terrible.
What I can do,
terrible.
What I'll do is I'll start a Google document.
Okay.
And I'll link the post. Post the link, and I'll start writing. And anybody can contribute as I'm writing, and I'll write while you talk.
All right, crowdsourcing the secretary duties. That's awesome. In a way.
But I'll do the base. But if anybody wants to add to it, the link will be open for anybody and everybody.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So, yeah.
Distributed to the secretary.
Yeah, everything's distributed now, which is awesome. So let's get started. Anybody maybe who wants to, let's say, just read the first sentence, and we'll go article by article. Ville, do you want to just start reading the first sentence? I see there's a first sentence and then the first article. So you could just read it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's start with the first sentence. This constitution is a multi-party contract entered into by the members by virtue of their use of this blockchain. And I think that here note 40 is that there are no definition of member. There is no definition of blockchain. There is no definition of use. There is no definition of, the Constitution.
I guess that's throughout, right? So in the whole document, there's no reference definition document. Although, because this particular Ricardian is found in the EOS blockchain, I think that the assumption that it's the blockchain refers to the EOS blockchain. But again, I think you're right. That's one thing that is missing. There's no reference document to any definition for any of the terms, which is quite unusual.
Yeah, and with my Ethereum experiments with the companies, I run into a problem of defining the ruling chain, and we decided with our lawyers, to define that the only legal actions for any of those companies, only the ones who are in the strongest chain of Ethereum are valid ones. Because forking is always a possibility, we defined the actions being legal only in the strongest chain. So, for example, if because in Ethereum you have proof of work, so you can calculate the branch of a chain that has more work into it. So if a company would have been set up before Ethereum Classic fork, only the actions in the main Ethereum network would have been valid ones, because that's the strongest chain. So here
in
also
EOS,
we have
what would you suggest? Because we have DPoS, would you say, for example, that the strongest chain is the one that has the most participation? So if ever there was a fork tomorrow, and there was a side chain that was spun up, or shouldn't call it a side chain, there was another chain that was spun up, and in that chain, we would have, let's say, 300 million stake tokens, and now this current chain would have 200 million stake tokens. Which one would be the valid one? Would it be this one? Would it be the other one? How would we do this in DPoS? What if it's exactly like 250? Yeah,
it's really really difficult, because we kind of presume that we would be working on the same branch, and if we would have forks or side chains, those would cooperate with EOS, or with this particular chain that we are using. But it's difficult because then we have to decide, is it this branch only? And if we define so, then we have to come up with a definition. And if there is a fork or something like that, is the constitution then invalid?
Well, I think we touched upon that, Ville. So let's say you were able to gather enough support to be able to launch another chain. You could just write your own constitution for that chain. So this particular constitution would only apply to the chain that it's in. So I don't think we would have that issue. To me, that's a non-issue. Right now, if we're reviewing the current constitution that's obviously applied to this particular chain, it applies to this chain. If ever there's a new chain that sets up, so for example, Worldly, or somebody mentioned Wax, I think that was used June last week. So if we're talking about other chains, they can define their own constitution. And this constitution has no say in it because they're completely different chains. It's an open source software. So I'm not sure that there's value in determining whether or not, if there's a fork, or if there's, I'm not even sure if it would be a fork, if ever there's a new chain that's spun up, is this constitution valid on it? Well, it depends. Do they copy it, or do they write a new constitution in this? And then people who participate in this new chain would be bound by the Ricardian that's in that new chain, whatever that may be.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Oh, yeah. And we have technical forks even at this very moment, because there is some latency issues with the block producers. There is something called micro forks happening, but those are not long-lived because as DPoS is encouraging is to work on the same chain. so all the producers agree that, okay, this is microfork, it's handled this way, and so on. So I'm not even sure how a fork would really work. I haven't thought about that.
Well, I guess are forks even possible? Is that even a thing? Because now that we have an open source software that can simply be reused, is a fork even a thing?
Yeah, it's because in the fork you would need at least separate block producers, and then you would still have the same tokens, so you would need to have enough people in the fork.
I guess in our case, it would simply be
I haven't been thinking.
The version of the chain that keeps being used by the block producers is not the fork, it is the chain, and then anything that's not being used. So this hypothetical situation might only be an issue if block producers do not agree on which version of the chain should be used. And then this question of how many stake tokens are on either or could maybe become something. But I think right now we're getting into a really, really fringe, niche example of what could happen. We're kind of shying away from right now the Constitution itself and where we were. So we keep veering off. I think maybe try to go back.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So should we continue with the first article then?
Any other comments on just the very first sentence we're on? But aside from that, hey, how's it going, Patrick? How's it going, Martin? Europe chain is another example, I guess, that Martin mentioned in terms of other forks.
Yeah, but those are not, they would not be forks. They would simply be another chain.
Yeah. There'll be another chain. So,
like we're talking about, I guess, sister chains and brother chains and cousin chains and grandma chains, and like we can call them what they want. They're really just other chains.
Okay. So yeah, we could go ahead. I think maybe just Article 1 and 2 are kind of in the same general, I guess. I mean, they're maybe we should just put 1 and 2 together. And we'll just go like discuss those two as a group, I guess. But so if anyone wants to read it, I'll go ahead and read it, I guess. So Article 1 is no initiation of violence. Members shall not initiate violence or the threat of violence against another member. Lawful prosecution of crimes with the goal of preserving life, liberty, and property does not constitute initiation of violence. So is
you guys were here? Yeah. Were you guys here when this was drafted and when this was put in? And do you guys remember how much ruckus this caused? And then do you remember Dan's take and opinion on whether or not this should even be in there?
Okay, no. If you wanna,
this
maybe
created a lot of problems. This was a so there was 3 articles that actually it's only 2 articles really at launch that created a lot of ruckus at that time, right? Mm-hmm. There was Article 1, which is the no initiation of violence, and there was Article 15, if I'm not wrong, the termination of agreement. So those were the 2 that Dan really was not happy with. And Article 1 in particular, he was saying that if we put this in, he might not even recognize this version of EOS as the mainnet. And the specific lines in there that he did not agree with was the second line where it says lawful prosecution of crimes with the goal of preserving life, liberty, and property does not constitute initiation of violence. So what is your take on why do you think this article was created, and then why do you think that particular line was put in? Because if you're not aware, I'd like to get your feel and what you think. And then I remember what it was and kind of what the ruckus was.
And I would agree that is, and that surprised me because this is the first I've read of that. And
it was pretty hardcore.
Yeah, and it's number one, I mean, who's enforcing it? But usually the state enforces these prosecution of crimes, and it's, the state is force by nature. So if you're a libertarian and if somehow at least suggests that there's some ability for a state to do something like this, I think that might be where his disagreement was. But in reality, it's like, who is this? Is this allowing external states to determine what this?
That was the issue.
Okay,
that was exactly the issue.
Yeah, and I disagree with that because if we're building something new, we should be sovereign from any external state intervention. And so yeah, I agree. I mean, why do we have this? Number one, this is actually a critical issue because external intervention into the blockchain is going to be a crucial issue. I think there might be some people that want to interoperate, and I think in some ways that's okay. But state intervention and all of that, to me, I think most people would want to remove external intervention. So from any state actor to dictate, what is right, what we could do with the property on the blockchain. So everybody, I think most people here have this feeling of sovereignty that, hey, this is our property. We should have, we shouldn't have any external, even our own governments be able to dictate what happens. But anyways, I don't want to talk more. You guys go ahead and comment.
No, but it's really good. Actually, you're on to it. What's your take on it, Ville? And then I'll give you guys the background. But what you said, June, is really good.
I think that we have this same problem of lack of definitions here, because when you have a real country and you have case law and the letter of law, and then you have automatically a definition of violence. That's either by the history of the cases, or by the criminal law, or it can be from whatever source, from a king, whatever. So you could easily write to your law in your country. You could easily write that no violence, period. But here we don't really define violence. So without this sentence, prosecution could be violence because we don't acknowledge a state. This is, I think, a difficult question because we would need definitions of violence, or good definition of violence, and then we could define it in our jurisdiction. And also we have to remember that we can work only within the contractual freedom. We cannot work on criminal law because that's always defined and enforced by
no, I agree with you, Ville. Not always. I think common law can. Well, yeah, mostly. But anyway, so go ahead, Yves. You got to go soon, I guess.
Yeah, I got to go in like 3 minutes. So I'll just give you the rundown. So that first part, so everything that both of you said is really good and it's really crucial. And it was part of the discussion when this particular article was being drafted. Now, the issue with Dan was especially the second part of that, so the lawful prosecution of crime. So I'll touch with that first. And the idea behind that was the people that were proponents of adding this into it were talking about fraud. And they were talking about fraud on chain, where somebody can come on chain, somebody somehow can come do fraud on chain, steal the tokens or do whatever. And then they wanted recourse in the real world if you were able to prove that. And they were saying, you need to be able to prosecute those people that have committed fraud on chain if they, for example, come on chain, commit fraud and leave the chain, but you're able to retrace that. They're no longer on chain, but they wanted means to use external governments, like you said, to be able to prosecute those people. And then said, no, we're not adding that. If we want to be a separate nation, if we want to be a separate, a sovereign government, then we're not going to be playing by these other governments' rules and interacting with them. We're going to be doing our own thing. And he had given a couple of examples. I don't remember exactly what it was in terms of specific examples he had given, but it was very clear on that he didn't want that in there. And so that particular part was rewritten multiple times. And in the end, that's what was put in. The first part, and it touches to what Ville said, you're entirely correct that we need to define our terms again. First of all, who are these members? But if we were to define members, okay, so members in this particular case would be token holders. But again, even what does that mean? Because if my tokens are on exchange, does token holder mean private key holder? Does it mean the person who can somehow go back and show that those tokens actually belong to them? So even that's not even defined. But members should not initiate violence or the threat of violence against another member. You're entirely right that so let's say you and I are in the street and you happen to be a token holder, I happen to be a token holder, and I steal your bicycle or I punch you in the face in the street. Well, that's going to be dealt with external courts. It's not going to be dealt with on chain. I'm not going to go back and say, by the way, I know that Ville has EOS tokens. I have EOS tokens. I want you to punish him on chain for something he did off chain. So this whole article, a lot of the issues with the way that it's currently written was it's very ambiguous in terms of off chain versus on chain. And that definitely, I believe that going forward, when we're going to be rewriting these articles and the Constitution as a whole, this is an article that definitely needs a lot of love and attention because it's not clear right now. The big ambiguities are the off-chain versus on-chain. And like Ville said as well, what does it mean to initiate violence on-chain? And I think the intent behind it was to go and steal tokens or to try to, I think there was a lot of talk about intrinsic violence versus extrinsic violence. So the concept of the violence was to do something that you weren't really in agreement with. And then there was tons of different examples of how that was used. And then it was pretty tricky. So overall, this article is garbage, I think is the right now, the general consensus, the way it's written, because it's not clear. It's very difficult to enforce. And I think it was Jason that was saying earlier, if you can't enforce an article, why the hell is it there in the first place? It's got no value if it's just fluff and you really first of all, can't define it properly, it's not clearly written, and there's nothing you can do with it, then what's the point of it being there?
Yeah,
I've got to drop off. I'm sorry. I noticed it was 7:00 and I have another meeting. But I did put the Google Drive thing, which I haven't written since I was talking. But if you guys want to keep on writing in it, feel free.
Okay, thanks a lot for starting that up, and thanks for participating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And hopefully you can drop in.
Thank you very
soon.
much.
Yeah, I'll try to come back if you guys are still online later.
Okay.
All right, cheers.
All right, sounds good. And those are all great insights and to the background of this. And Jason, yeah, you're right. It's not enforceable. That's another big thing. And as Ville mentioned, this is criminal law, which is usually outside. I mean, it's not under contract law. So if this is a contract, why are we having this as well? So I think a lot of these articles that are more about things that would deal with criminal law, or that's usually dealt in criminal law. I think even the next article is possibly in the same space. So I think, yeah, if it's unenforceable, if it should be part of a different type of law, criminal law, even just common law. I mean, these aren't about two people having a contract with each other. And this is supposed to be a contract between us and, I guess, the EOS chain or the community. But so there might be some ways to put certain things like that in the contract, but it's not typically part of contracts. Like, these are outside the scope in my mind, and it's and these are unenforceable. That's as well. So anyway, so this is an interesting debate. Any further comments on that first one, and we'll probably head to the second one. Ville, anybody else? Okay. So okay, Jason, do you want to? Okay, you could be on audio. Even if you don't have a webcam, I think you could just go straight to audio. So let me invite you, Jason. Okay.
I will take some water.
And then Marcin, if you're still there, you want to drop in as well. Anybody else who wants to join us, we can get up to 4 people on video. So, hey, how's it going, Jason?
Hey guys. Pretty well. Happy to be here.
All right, awesome. So, yeah. So, any follow up to, I guess, our last discussion?
Yeah.
You wrote a lot there.
I think I might have been misread with the comment that I made.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I believe that this sentence, I guess, or article for non-initiation of violence, it gives the arbitrators at least the opportunity to enforce something that's provable. In the rare occurrence that violence might occur in the real world and be used as a coercion to force a token transfer, we don't have a single court jurisdiction that can enforce the EOS blockchain. Only the arbitrator for the EOS blockchain can enforce the EOS blockchain. So the arbitrator needs to have language in the Constitution that empowers them to take evidence on such a claim.
So, okay, so that's an interesting point, but these aren't, in my opinion, these aren't typically considerations under contract law. And this is just a broad kind of civil society, I guess, yeah, this is usually in that space and not contract law. So I don't think arbitrators ever really are I don't know arbitrators that will deal with any of these issues. Really, they usually just deal with property and contracts for businesses and things like that. And this is really, like Ville said, left up to criminal law and or common law. So So we can have a broad-based legal framework. That's maybe in the future. If people want it now and if there's a demand for it, you can kind of maybe even create it. But I would recommend a common law system. But regardless, this is out of the scope of most arbitrators. What arbitrators do, we should double check. But I'm pretty sure arbitrators don't deal with this.
Yeah. But there is one angle where in contract law, violence and things like those are important is that you shouldn't, when you are making a contract with someone, you shouldn't use his or her bad position for you, or you shouldn't have threats. You shouldn't use any kind of external enforcement.
Okay. Okay, Vila, you make a good point. So it's more of a in contract law, you can't be forced to sign something, and a contract's invalid if you're forced to do something. So in that way, it's not so much that it's in the contract. It's just a part of the evaluation, the standard evaluation process anyway. So if anything, I think it's just
equally in every country. That's something that we enjoy in some countries, but if we're going to rely on existing enforcement agencies to enforce criminal law, we can't expect them to do it in a uniform way, and we can't expect them to make any remedies that apply to the EOS token balance.
Yeah, and so I think that the main thing also you mentioned with enforcement is for legal contracts, they either make the contract void or are valid, right? And that's the extent of what they use this idea of that it shouldn't be forced. But they don't do anything beyond that where it's like, okay, finding evidence of crime and investigating and things like that. That's
no investigation. Evidence needs to be provided by the complainant.
Okay, but specifically just for things like signing a contract, if this is like a valid, it's not done beyond that. It's usually, okay, this contract, was there something wrong with this contract? Was it forced? Was it and that's the extent of which kind of violence is considered. If it was just and that will just determine if a contract's valid or not. So I think the idea that we're the arbitrator is going to cover all sorts of violence and interpret subjectively what what level, what extent, what crimes, what types of violence. I think that's that's typically outside the scope of contract law.
Yeah, we could probably substitute this with like single sentence of only free will contracts will be valid or something like that.
Sure. It's true. If it's not a standard in let's say other nations, maybe we should specify that. I'm not familiar, but it just contract law just it may not be. So we'd have to check, but it's pretty common, if not a standard for
I agree with that. I agree that arbitrators don't operate in the realm of criminal law. And what we have is an arbitrator, and this bridges a gap between contract law and criminal law. I think the only overlap is duress.
Okay.
Contract is null and void in the evidence if you can provide evidence of duress.
Okay.
And I think that it reads with a lot less alarm. When someone reads that word, it applies more accurately, and also it's way less alarming.
So I think that's good. And then the other thing I would say that could help improve certain situations, especially when there's contract law that doesn't consider those issues. I think just overall with the Constitution, when I'm reading this and it's just I feel like we can always write more articles for edge cases, right? and there are many different just edge cases everywhere. So what my concern is that, you know, you get to a point like, how detailed do we want to go, and how many situations do we need to cover? And I just prefer something, you know, less is more. Like, if it's not absolutely necessary, in my mind, it's just my opinion. It's just like that, might as well not have it, because people, the other thing, people don't even read it. Like, half of this, like, you know, we're participating, we're active members, but in this discussion, but if you look at just anyone outside our circles and just the general public, or even EOS token holders, most people aren't interested, right? So it's like, and they're going to be confused more so than anything else. So I think it does have to be very, in my opinion, like it has to be almost absolutely necessary. Otherwise, I would prefer to just not have it at all. Like, any of these articles, just from like the brief review I'm having on some of these articles. So anyway, so that's just
I agree that simplicity is usually brilliant, and if we can make it simple, then that would be ideal, as simple as possible. But also, we need to account for everything that is foreseeable, at least. In terms of edge cases, we would consider edge cases to not be foreseeable, but I think that the risk of duress is foreseeable.
Okay.
And the arbitrator needs to have language that empowers it to render a contract or render an interaction reversible.
Okay. Yeah. That's a common. Yeah, I think that's a common contract issue, and so we'd have to also ask, you know, for the arbitrators, you know, what's their kind of current handling of that. Like, we can ask ECAF, let's say, because, you know, that's a potential problem just in any of these recording contracts. That's a standard problem. So we should ask them, and we should ask if it is necessary in the Constitution to have that.
Well, I think it's important for us not, like, I come from Canada. I think you come from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I haven't asked before, but that's beside the point. It's important for us not to assume that our understanding of contract law will apply to contract law on the EOS blockchain, because the EOS blockchain is global, and this is a creation, a fresh slate of creating as simple a set of rules as possible. Non-invasive, simple, yes. But we can't just assume that some laws we enjoy already will carry over.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, all nations have varying laws, probably contract laws, and it's great that there is something called UNCITRAL for arbitration, because if you guys haven't heard about what, you know, Thomas mentions a lot, and you know, UNCITRAL is a convention for arbitration, and it's an agreement with many different countries, 150 countries, I believe, that agree to agree to accept binding arbitration. So I think it's great that at least, you know, that makes things a little bit more efficient, and, you know, gets common ground amongst different countries. So Patrick has a question. I don't know if we should answer this right now. Basic question: if I understand right, I can specify in a recording contract of a smart contract the judge court in my country, right? So this is this is interesting, because you know, we're mainly relying on, I don't know where Vile went, but we're relying on arbitration, and not so much outside courts, but technically, I guess you could try to do that. You could try to get your local court to, try a case with your recording contract. But if it's a contract, they'd probably defer to, this. But you could probably do that, except jurisdiction is always a problem. So if your issue or your contract with someone outside, that's why arbitration helps, because it's not like, is it your local court that's going to have jurisdiction or another country court or state court that's going to have jurisdiction? And that's why arbitration helps that, because they say, okay, if you have an arbitrator, you don't have to determine jurisdiction.
My take on it is that, yes, you can try to do that. But my question is, do you expect that the blog producers will honor the instructions from the court of your choice? I think that's a really critical question to ask, is that the only things that will be enforced on the EOS blockchain are enforced by the block producers, and the block producers only take instructions from known entities.
Yeah, that's another good point too. Yeah.
Because then we will have censorship problems with, for example, some unnamed Asian governments, for example, could be a problem. And of course, there have been in many other areas also all kinds of censorship. So what if police or court from some unnamed Asian government says that this should be removed? So yeah, that's a good question. By which extent block producers will honor the courts, if at all. But I have to say quickly that in Finland we have also this possibility that you can bring your contract to court even after arbitration. But court will rule, if the arbitration is done correctly, court will always rule for the arbitration. So that will indirectly have legal protection.
And Ville, that what you mentioned is because Finland is probably one of the countries, part of UNCITRAL, that will abide by arbitration rulings by in any arbitration organization. So that's part of the that's for all the 150 countries that have signed the agreement. They'd probably have the same process as in Finland that you just mentioned. So Robert, I'll invite you as well. So let's try to keep.
Yes,
okay, so Jason's going to be back. Let me invite Robert here. Just and heretics. So let's move on to the second article. So who wants to read that out?
No.
Ville, you want to go ahead?
Okay. So second article.
Yeah, it's Article 2.
Or wait, is it third now? Okay, yeah. No perjury. Members shall be liable for losses caused by false or misleading attestations and shall forfeit any profit gained thereby.
So anybody have comments on that? So let me reread that again, just in my again. So members shall be liable for losses. So I mean, I understand the principle, or I think it could help improve the culture of the chain. I just think this is very difficult to enforce, and that's one reason. And it goes a little bit more to the whole common law, criminal law side of things. That's why I grouped this along with violence as, I mean, they're important. They're to me, they should be a standard amongst communities broadly to accept this. But it's usually under civil or common law, I'm sure. So anyways, so I think I like the intent of it, but I just think it's unnecessary and it's unenforceable. Just my thought on that. So.
Oh yeah, that's true, and it's kind of general part of contract law that you shouldn't lie. That's kind of a fundamental thing, that you can only agree on things which are true. and well, yeah, that's so basically this is the "You shall not lie" article that we were talking about last week. And I also agree that I agree on the intention of it, but we could also substitute this with a general goodwill of the contract or something like that, which would include duress and perjury. So this kind of general, quick general introduction
Yeah,
of
yeah. So
what
it's kind of interesting,
contract
like you
should be
mentioned with
based
contract
on.
law, that it's again they don't. It's one of those things where you're not supposed to lie on contracts, right? And when they get in arbitration, when they provide evidence and things like that, you're not. Yeah, it's but contracts itself, yeah, there's doesn't seem. It's again, and maybe outside the scope, or just a standard rule that is in contract law, anyways. That you know, so
Yeah, and if there's a jurisdiction which wouldn't specify that contract should based on truths, then it would be trivial for a schooler to prove to court that
okay,
contract
yeah,
should be
yeah.
based on truths.
So any other comments, guys, on this one? And Ville, maybe like a statement of values or principles, maybe just not an article, but part of an introduction. Yeah, I think that's fine. We want to just make a statement as something that's based on consensus, that's not really enforceable, but maybe at least gives people certain positive, I guess, impressions, and whether or not these are enforceable or not. We shouldn't make it so much so like articles, but just general principles, like a code of ethics or something, right? You have a lot of organizations that have a code of ethics, and but they're not really part of bylaws or the Constitution. Mission statement, values, things like that. I think it could be part of that. So let's.
Yeah.
I think Robert might join us next
would
week
be
if he
good.
gets his device. He gets this working on his new device. But let's go. Anybody want to go with the fourth? Oh, the third one. I'll just read it just for efficiency. Rights, Article 3. The members grant the right of contract and of private property to each other. Therefore, no property shall change hands except with the consent of the owner, by a valid arbitrations order, or via community referendum. The Constitution creates no positive rights for or between any members. So,
yeah, this is something that I had in my experiments. I had this in the Ethereum smart contract or something like this, because problem was that what if something like a DAO hack is possible with my smart contract, my company? So we defined in the legal prose, we defined that only the intentional actions.
Hey, Ville, can you turn off your video for a moment to kind of just repeat what you just said?
Okay. Yeah. So we had this kind of clause in the prose of one of those Ethereum experiments on companies, that we were afraid if there will be something like DAO hack concerning our smart contracts, So we define something like only intentional actions are legal, considered legal, because we couldn't give a possibility for a DAO kind of a hack to be legal. So we kind of decided that something like this we had to have. So I understand that this covers also smart contract hacking and smart contract.
So this applies
bugs.
because when I first read it, I didn't think of all of these cases that you mentioned about the DAO hack. So let me read this again. So first, it grants the right of contract for each people. No property shall change hands except with the consent of the owner, an arbitrator's order, or via community referendum. So you think the DAO hack situations apply, or this article applies to these hacks, I guess?
Yeah,
Okay.
it wouldn't be the consent of the owner.
Okay, so yeah, it's about property. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so
Yeah.
on that as well. All of these. Since you mentioned the DAO hack, I was just thinking, and this also mentions it via community referendum. You could technically reverse major situations by referendum. So you don't need an article to solve kind of the DAO hack. You could just probably put it up for referendum and just vote to reverse the transaction or whatever, or update a contract.
Oh well, yeah. That's a good point. But let's see. Could there be some minor bugs which wouldn't be legible for referendum, but would still make a difference?
Okay, that's true too.
I don't know yet.
There's and this goes all. I think this goes also to the issue of, are we going to have arbitration at the base layer or not? And that also applies to that conversation. Because I know Marcin mentioned that he would only like just major situations to be resolved by arbitration and nothing else. And so when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, okay, if it's only major situations you could do with community referenda, you don't need ECAP for that either if you do it that way, right? So that's anything else? Anybody else? I know that Patrick, you had a question. So this is another question. I don't know if this is okay. Is it right that an EOS smart contract has to be bound with a Ricardian contract?
Oh well, I think that it will make things a lot easier when your actions will constitute a contract. So
yeah, I'm sure
I think that will simplify things.
Obligatory. I mean, you can just write a blank Ricardian contract or whatever, right, and just have code. Just write the code. But I think the idea is that the Ricardian contracts should improve. In the case of arbitration, your potential to resolve any issues that come up. But I think people are lazy too. So I think a lot of people might not write, Ricardian contracts. And a lot of them, it's just my guess. I don't know. So that's my answer there, Patrick. So what else about this rights thing about, okay, so first sentence, I think, the members grant the right of contract and private property to each other. so to me, I always think, okay, everybody has a right to contract. At least most people have the right to contract. So this goes back to that other point where, do we have to write it in there? But maybe some countries, they don't have the right to contract. Maybe it's only in the advanced nations like the US and others that allow private contracting. So maybe these things are for to help, you know, other people that don't have don't have these rights.
Yeah, that could be part of the code of ethics
Yeah,
that you proposed.
Honestly, the way I interpret this this article is that I think the most important aspect of it is mentioning community referendum. I think another important aspect of it is it creates no positive rights between it, for or between any members. Other than that, I think it largely fits into a code of ethics that it's almost implied, but not. I don't think it hurts that this is written as it is. It is almost implied that we grant each other the right to private property and to contract. But the reason I like this article is because it can't be misconstrued in any way that's harmful. The only thing that's harmful about it is just that it takes up space, which isn't really that harmful. So I say leave it in there.
Okay, so I think so it's good that you made that statement, and so and I'm more about simplicity too. So if I had to choose, like, then I'd go, like, to me it's like, if you're gonna put it in there, it has to be like significantly like more important to have it in there versus if it's like equal weighting. In my thought, I was like, I just keep it out if it's like if it's not significantly.
It introduces the concept of the right to personal property and private property and the right to contract.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why it's got interpretive powers for enforcement is because it mentions community referendum, and also because it limits itself by granting no positive rights.
Okay, and so the last part about creating no positive rights, so that makes sense. Is that? But how are you saying that it's okay? It just reinforces the idea that those are the only ways that property can be transferred. So
yeah, I think what it means, the way I interpret it, grants no positive rights means that I can't force an exchange to accept my EOS and transfer it into a different asset. Or I guess just more generally, a member can't force anybody else to accept EOS. That acceptance of EOS is voluntary. And that's what it means when it says the Constitution grants no positive rights. It means, the way I interpret it, means nobody is under any legal obligation to accept EOS at any particular time.
Okay, so
that's a good point.
Okay, so you're talking specifically about accepting EOS.
That the arbitrator can't enforce that, for example, or that would not be enforceable if I insisted that an exchange were to accept EOS and transfer it out to fiat currency. That might be something that we would want as EOS token holders, that we could have some guarantee of acceptance. But this clause, this article limits itself in that way, and saying that acceptance is always voluntary.
Okay, so that's an interesting perspective. I remember a little bit about, negative and positive rights from the past, more in kind of libertarian philosophy. I think negative rights was that you can't do anything. What is it? It's almost like expectations. And positive rights is that you expect someone to give you something, like you have some
like an entitlement.
Entitlement, exactly. entitlement for something, and then negative is just that, it's a little more about, what you can or can't do, not necessarily what anything in terms of gaining or entitlement. So how does that fit in through to this, or is it, because I'm trying to figure out if that has anything to do with what the comment, that last statement.
Well, sure. There might be some edge cases that come up where somebody feels entitled to something in particular. One way to interpret this article would be to say that members are not entitled to any particular distribution or special distribution, or entitled to any part of the inflation unless you are a block producer at the moment, or like it's a governed blockchain, but it's not a government that has any sort of welfare state.
Yeah, maybe that. So that's also because we're talking about property and exchanging property. So I guess it could fit under that realm too, that people aren't entitled to anything beyond just everything that's stated beforehand, whether it's under a contract or if you agree. So
yeah. To me, the only meaningful interpretation of this is about voluntary acceptance of the token. For instance, let's just say that I was trying to propose a transfer or trying to propose a contract of some kind, and the person refused to accept the EOS token. And then I take that to the arbitrator and say, my deal didn't go through because this person did not accept EOS token at face value. And I would think that if I had an entitlement to acceptance of the EOS token, that the arbitrator could enforce that at fair market value. And this I want to say amendment, but this article in the Constitution, it limits itself and it limits the scope of an arbitrator. The arbitrator is not empowered to force anybody to accept EOS at any particular time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I understand where you're coming from there. That seems like a case that would fall under this, where you can't force someone to accept EOS, I guess.
Well, yeah, because the Constitution is really for the arbitrator. This is the way I see it. It's sort of the foundation on which the arbitrator derives its powers.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting.
Game that we all agree to play.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that as well. So, in our U.S. Constitution, I always try to kind of make the point that it's not really the U.S. Constitution is really not for the people. It's actually for the government. It's a contract between the government. It's just a contract for willing participants of the government and limits their powers. So you can think of this in the same way where, okay, if this is just for the arbitrators, this is like just kind of a contract for the arbitrators and doesn't need to include too much about people's rights.
No, but it does. I think it does.
Yeah.
It's worth putting in there that a community referendum can be enforceable.
Yeah,
and it's worth putting in there a restriction on the arbitrator that the arbitrator cannot force acceptance of the token at any particular time.
Yeah. If you're enumerating the rights of, because the U.S. Constitution, as an example, enumerates the rights of the government, right, or the limited rights of the government to do certain actions, and so this is the same thing where if it's important to limit and enumerate what an arbitrator can do. That makes sense. So
that's how I see it. I see the Constitution as a tool for the arbitrators.
Okay.
Whether it's base layer or DApp layer.
Okay, that's a good way perspective to have. Sometimes I think of there's another actor as well. So the real enforcers are the block producers. So it's almost like in the context of, let's say, being analogous to the U.S. Constitution, you want to also limit the powers of the block producers as well, possibly, and the arbitrators, because those are the two powers. So maybe that's just something to think about. So I do agree. So this is for arbitrators, but then also we have this other block producer, I guess, block producers as actors in this ecosystem, and we there's potential problems there, so there might be a need to limit some of the powers there as well. But anyway, so we'll go. So that sounds good. So I think we covered rights pretty well. Thanks, Jason.
Could we generalize both of these points? Like, first of all, could we put the involuntary acceptance to the code of ethics of a contract? Like you can't force people to a contract with you, and then could we generalize arbitration by saying that will of the members is the highest will?
Wait, can you repeat what you said? I caught the last kind of half of things, but you wanted to have a general statement rather than an article in regards to
the voting and referendums. So could we just say that will of the members is the highest will, or something like that?
Maybe as a statement of values. It's hard to give, like, it's such a general statement that it's hard to give it any teeth. And I think that all of the articles together add up to that sentiment. But just to say the will of the members is the highest power, I think it's just a little bit too general.
Yeah, I think I know where you're kind of philosophically going with that. I think going back to the analogy of the U.S. Constitution, I think is the idea that the will of the people were paramount over I think any of this. So somehow, at least stating that, or I don't know. I'm just there's too many ideas kind of floating around, and so maybe I shouldn't go further than to explain that. So
I think that's sort of touched on with the whole community referendum. That is a community referendum, is an expression of the will of the people.
True. So
yeah, that was exactly what I was after. So yeah. So could we have this more like a generalized point that the will of the people is the highest power?
You could have that. Again, you can always have this statement of values, or just the first paragraph in this constitution to give more of. If you look at I have the U.S. Constitution, and they essentially have the very first paragraph, right? And before all the articles, we the people of the U.S. in order to form a more perfect union. That's the reason, right? First reason, and then just goes on, and it's just one short paragraph. So we could write something like that, and in there, we should consider doing something like that. So, anyways, do you want to? Are you guys good? Okay.
Yep.
So, Article 4. Does someone want to read that out? I guess.
I'll read this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Jason or
so.
What?
Oh, okay. Jason,
this is one of my favorites because I'm part of a DAC, the EOS Cafe DAC, which is part of the EOS Cafe block producer. We're separate entities. And we just share branding, and the block producer sponsors the DAC. And this is one of the things that really made me believe in the EOS Cafe block producer is their commitment to no vote buying. Article 4, no vote buying.
Okay.
No member shall offer nor accept anything of value in exchange for a vote of any type, nor shall any member unduly influence the vote of another.
Okay, so that this is another interesting article for sure.
This is a restriction on the block producers.
Yeah, this was one for the block producers. So Avile, do you want to start? I guess.
Oh yeah, because we have EOS DAC, which is kind of a corner case here, because EOS DAC gives tokens that you can use in the future to vote how the payouts are paid, and you could vote for giving the EOS to the members of EOS DAC. So that's kind of indirect vote buying. As a disclaimer or disclosure, I'm part of EOS DAC as a token holder. So
everybody is.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, because of the airdrop.
So that's an interesting point. So how do you respond to that, Jason? Because what do we do with these DACs?
In terms of the technical operations of EOS DAC, it is not vote buying. What they did is they found a clever gray area by distributing ownership for free. So they just gave every EOS token holder partial ownership of a block producer candidate. And, well, is that something of value? At that point, you're not voting for somebody else. At that point, you're voting for yourself indirectly. And I'm a little bit torn on it because, if you look at the technical aspect of it, it's not vote buying. But if you look at the spirit of the law, in a way, it's a transfer of value that incentivizes voting for the EOS Cafe DAC. I think that's pretty clear right on the surface that it violates the spirit of this article.
Okay, and I do agree. It's that's an interesting situation there. The other thing I would mention about no vote buying is enforceability of that is another probably issue. How to identify vote buying, especially when you talk about gray situations like that, and then what level of enforcement and investigation that you need on that, and also the principle of not vote buying. That's the other thing. I mean, I could I could probably make a case that vote buying might be beneficial in certain situations, right? In general, as a principle, to make things efficient. And so anyways, from a free market perspective. So, but that's kind of another one. But just enforceability is the first one, I guess.
Yeah. How do you give this teeth, and how do you interpret this? If you're the arbitrator, let's say somebody takes it to the arbitrator and says they claim that EOS DAC has committed vote buying. If you were the arbitrator and you had to interpret this article to determine whether or not EOS DAC has in fact been vote buying, what would you do about it? What would be the remedy? And let's just assume that, well, let's not assume anything. I guess the first question is, would you say that it is vote buying? And if you did say it was vote buying, then what would the proper remedy be?
Go ahead, Dylan. You could go first, and I'll follow.
Oh, thanks. I would say it's a vote. It's vote buying because you will have the transfer of value and motivation to vote.
Okay, so the effective, whether it's intended or not, it's effectively vote buying is what you're saying, probably. And I would say it's actually a gray area and it's subjective. And my thought is not all legal, not all law is clear cut, right? I think that's why you have common law and case studies, right? And there's legal principles that you use. And I think we'd probably have to dig in deep for the principles, but law is not that clear cut all the time. And this is one of those things where you probably even have to build kind of some knowledge in and some understanding principles, and then. But I think there is this element of subjectivity to that, and I think you could find maybe almost half of the arbitrators going one way or the other, possibly on the different principles, right?
It is subjective, and you know what? Like, this is a gray area, but I consider it to be light gray, and it's just a matter of the circumstance that EOS Stack happens to be creating really good tools and participating really well as a block producer, and they've honored their responsibilities as a block producer correctly. Basically, they're doing a good job of it in every way that you can measure it. And they've even shared some resources and helped sort of pave the road for everybody else in terms of tools for building a decentralized autonomous corporation. And overall, it's been good for the decentralized movement, which is part of what we're all here for. So in the case of EOS Stack, it is a gray area, and one could interpret what they've done as vote buying. My personal subjective take on it is that it's very light gray, because they are, in every way a person can measure it, good actors for the ecosystem. Plus, they gave away ownership of the block producer to everybody, and that's an asset that a lot of us are appreciative of having.
Okay, so I think that there's that's interesting, and I think that's a good perspective to have. But kind of in legal terms, though, it's usually it's stricter in terms of so those issues that you mentioned in determining this, I think from a judicial kind of sense, should probably not interpret those aspects of it, because it's all about whether this is vote buying or not, and not so much about what they're doing.
Exactly. Right? So we're stuck on that.
so yeah, this is a very kind of. So I'll step back too with this whole vote buying thing as well. I mean, what is the purpose of, do you think, of trying to minimize vote buying? What's the purpose, like, do you think?
Well, this is basic bribery. This is it provides a legal foothold for the arbitrator to interpret claims against bribery. If a large token holder is bribing block producers and trying to get them to collude, or the other way around, if block producers are trying to bribe token holders for their votes to support them as a block producer, and this could also be applied in the worker proposal system. Depending on the future of the worker proposal system, there will be voting involved in that as it stands right now. And there's one of the main concerns with that is somebody who comes to the worker proposal forum and has a proposal, they're going to, they want their project to go forward, and there's an opportunity for them to bribe token holders.
Yeah, so bribery is like
language for the arbitrator to interpret claims that a bribe has been made.
Okay.
And give them some teeth to form a resolution when we can prove that a bribe has been made.
Okay, so it's interesting that you because I think bribery is when you think, you put it in that language, it does make it seem worse for sure. But I'm wondering, does it necessarily fall under that category?
I like plain language. I like the way people speak in the real world, and the plain word for it is bribe.
Okay, so if that's the case,
it can even happen with a large token holder attempting to bribe block producers to collude.
Yeah, and that's the danger. I think
there are many directions where this can happen.
I think the bribery, in a sense of collusion and especially to attack the system, right? Yeah. You want to prevent any kind of collusion primarily to somehow attack the system. In a sense, the other argument is that it's proof of stake, so there's some protection against that. but yeah, so that's, I think that's the primary principle that they're trying to uphold, that they want independent block producers to prevent collusion, especially for an attack on the entire network. So I do agree with the principle to try to protect from that. So is vote buying or discouraging vote buying a significant factor in that, or are there other ways to try to maintain independence? So, Vile, do you have any thoughts on that? So I think you're muted, just as an FYI. So yeah, this is interesting. So because from a free market perspective, I also like I'll mention that, you know, in the corporate setting, and I always use the corporate example as more analogous to the EOS blockchain and DPoS. And in corporations, there is a vote buying. It's allowed. There's no kind of there's, you know, it's, people have done continually have kind of vote buying. It's illegal for kind of I guess in government or in politics, but in the corporate setting, it's done. So people do that, and to me, in a free market perspective, to me, a vote kind of there's a value to the vote. Everyone votes for their interest, so no matter, even if it's political or corporate, you have interest in it, and it's natural, and everyone should have the kind of the right to vote for self-interest, because that's kind of the nature of the world, right? To vote in terms of how it'll improve your lives, right? So to me, using that principle, I mean, votes, the idea that you can sell your votes and profit, or you're essentially just sacrificing the ability for you to profit by voting some way, and instead just profit directly. But you're both, whatever action you take, you're almost doing the same thing, right?
That's an interesting direction, and I've actually seen this show up in a few of the chats, that this particular, and I still want to call it an amendment, but it's an article. This particular article should be taken out completely, perhaps, because we have very low voter turnout, and one of the reasons the theory goes why we have low voter turnout is because a person can't be rewarded for their vote. But if we applied a free market principle, and this is just operating in the realm of theory, but if we offered a free market principle for the vote and allowed a person to openly sell their vote, and now block producers are playing a completely different game.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's interesting.
Higher voter turnout.
Yeah, I didn't even think about voter turnout, but yeah, that's that might encourage like a lot more participation, and
it certainly would. I know for a fact it would encourage voter participation. But do we want it? Yeah. I mean, is this the right kind of voter participation? Because now voters aren't necessarily voting for the block producers that they believe in at all. They're just voting for the block producers who are willing to pay the most. And that becomes a running away train at a certain point for the block producers who strike an equilibrium first and can retain their position as an active block producer by buying votes. Then they can, over time, really solidify permanence as an active block producer just through the market forces, which is not necessarily a good state of affairs.
But I think that's an interesting point too. I think if it gets more competitive, though, they're going to have, because block producers make a lot. The reality is they make a lot, right? So the profit margins, that at least this excess, right, that they have that is beyond their cost is a profit essentially to them, right? So anything beyond that, I think they're going to have to eventually pay for votes. So it becomes like their profit margins would have to shrink by buying votes, and it's going to be competitive because everyone's doing that, right? So,
block producers have a really interesting game that they're already playing, and the way that they try to get votes the way that a block producer buys votes, and I'm using air quotes with my fingers and you can't see it, but the way that a block producer currently buys votes.
Okay, so there is kind of buying already.
Yeah, without buying votes is they build stuff and they sponsor stuff. And that's their way of doing it in a roundabout way. It provides value to somebody in the form of a tool or a platform or something that has been sponsored that in some way a person is incentivized to support. That's the way they do it right now, but it's not a direct vote buy.
Yeah, that is fascinating, and it's probably more I would say palatable, or the thought that hey, they're that's what's happening. It's not like this vote buying thing. It's like they're providing, right? It's like more of the gifting. Like hey, they're kind of getting like these proceeds, and as kind of giving back, they'll do something. Yeah. So I think vote buying is kind of more direct and just like more to me like reality. Like it's like what's really happening, right? It's like so yeah.
Am I still muted?
No, Vile, sorry about that. You can go.
Oh, okay, perfect. So I think that by removing this article, we would switch the focus from donating to the community by tools or services. We would switch the focus just for voting. For example, there could be services or block producers who would give you EOSs from their payouts if you vote for them, and that could be automatic. So this would motivate block producers just to get votes and not to do stuff for the community. So we would end up with these fake block producers that we currently have, because if you want to be a standby block producer, you just need votes. You don't need any infrastructure. You need a node which is registered as block producer, and then you just start to gather for votes. You call the rec producer action, and then you just start to get votes. Oh, did I disappear or June?
I think that's June. I think he'll be back.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
No worries.
Okay, he's back. Hello. So yeah, I think that then we would end up with hundreds and hundreds of fake block producers who just want to get paid and not having any infrastructure.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point too. It's going to definitely change the dynamic. I do like that it does encourage people to provide a lot of these tools and services, and there is an extra incentive to do that. I think they still probably will do that just to get additional votes anyways, but I think the incentive probably won't be as high. And I think any excess would probably go to vote buying directly. So I don't think it's going to be that bad. So I'm going to add Patrick to this conversation here too. We actually have a couple of minutes. Let me, hey, Patrick, hey guys, we should maybe wrap up in about 15 minutes too. But because we're heading up to two hours right now, and so this is going to kind of end. This broadcast is going to end. So we'll create a new. I'm going to call people into a new room, and then we'll have everybody. There's not a whole lot of people still here remaining. I think there's just about 4 of us. So we can just chat in another room. Just maybe however long you guys want to do it. And
I only have about a half hour left, and we're only on Article 4.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, man. This is gonna take a while. I have a feeling, so, but we're not going to cover, like, we'll just cover what we can in the next, maybe whatever, 10, 15, 30 minutes. But for just operationally, we're probably going to just, the broadcast is going to automatically end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you guys to another room, and then let me see.
Sure.